the conference organisers for letting me come here and to think out loud, to share some work in progress with you. So it's a great opportunity to get feedback, questions, comments and things like that. This paper is a chapter in progress from a bigger monograph on court culture and the formation of national identity in Scotland and England and beyond. I've reversed the usual hierarchy there because my focus is very much on Scotland as well. So I have been thinking about the construction of Scottish identity, and I started off looking at medieval and early modern commentators on Scottish identity, and I was looking at, actually, I read this article by Arthur Williamson, which I found really, really helpful, because he outlines really very clearly there the way in which Scottish historians and cultural commentators in the medieval and early modern period really struggled with an Aristotelian construction of civilization. So in Aristotle's Politics, he obviously centres the civilised world on classical Rome, classical Greece. And the further you get geographically, either to the north or to the south, people become more barbarous, more wild, by definition. So geographical location is integral in terms of civilization, or lack of it. In the Politics, Aristotle also says that civilization is an urban condition. So therefore, it's not only remoteness, but it's also to do with rural landscape is by definition then barbarous and wild and untamed. So Scottish scholars obviously struggled with this construction of northern identity. And perhaps the most obvious attempt to deal with this, what would we call it, a racial slur maybe, perhaps the most obvious attempt to deal with it comes from Mair, John Mair's commentary on the sentences of Peter Lombard and elsewhere, where Mair constructs this almost fracture line, if you like, between lowland and highland Scotland. So he says, yes, we do have barbarism in the north, but it's okay because it's up there, it's beyond the Highlands. In the lowlands and in the central belt, we're sort of like the English, so it's okay. So this is how Mair deals with these potentially pejorative constructions of northernness. He quarantines them to the Highlands. This analysis of Scottish national and cultural identity actually then is co-opted by the Scottish Crown, by the various Jameses, to justify and certainly underpin a nascent Scottish imperialism, which sees the colonisation of Orkney and Shetland. And it's also used, interestingly enough, by the Scottish and Portuguese crowns to justify what they're doing in the New World. Because Mair says that peoples furthest away from the Mediterranean centre, not only are they barbarous, but they are naturally inclined to slavery. They have a natural propensity to enslavement. And therefore this justifies various imperial expansions and so on. George Buchanan needs a mention here, because George Buchanan rehabilitates, if you like, he engages with this view of culture and national identity, and he goes some way to rehabilitating northern Scottish cultural identity. And he says, yes, Highlanders are different, but not naturally inclined to slavery. In fact, all of those features that Mayor had identified, Buchanan repositions within a discourse capable of living. So Buchanan says, yes, Highlanders are remote, but this is a good thing. This is a good thing because it means that they are uncorrupted by urban sophistication. And they have, in fact, retained natural military virtue. They are not particularly attached to material goods, which leads to kind of personal corruption. They instead have a much more kind of almost spiritual connection to the land. They have a kind of a natural ownership, a natural right to the landscape, and so on. So really, in researching these ideas relating to Highland identity, I've become really interested in the way that the construction of Highland identity is very conflicted, and it seems to oscillate. It flips between these two versions. On the one hand, you have the barbarous Highlanders, and we've heard in papers this morning, this is a construction that continues, for centuries. But also, at the same time, you have an alternative construction of what it is to be Scottish, of what it is to be Highland. And I think that the sort of dynamic interchange between these two ideas of Highland identity is something that ultimately feeds into the formation of the British Empire, the embryonic construction of what it is to be British. So, where does blackness come in to all of this? Okay, so in another chapter of this book, I have written on blackness and Highland identity and what blackness means in a Highland context. So I don't really want to go over that too much today. But one of the things I looked at was the tournament of the Wild Knight and the Black Lady. It's usually known as the tournament of the Wild Knight and the Black Lady, as most people know, I'm sure. But if you look in the Lord Treasurer's accounts, the record expenditure for this tournament, it's actually called the Black Knight and the Black Lady. And I thought this was really quite interesting as well. And I'm just going to flip forward to another slide here. But this is I've broken the first rule of PowerPoint here, haven't I? You never put loads of text up, but I've done it anyway, and I'm not going to read it. But this is from Piscotty, describing the tournament of the Wild Knight, the Black Knight, and the Black Lady, talking about James V as the Black Knight, and as the Black Knight, he's clearly stronger than everybody else. He has superior military skill. He even he gives battle, doesn't he, to knights and gentlemen from France, England, and Denmark. I thought this was really interesting. He's so strong, he even is superior to people who are skilled in these chivalric sports from further afield. And as I say, elsewhere I've looked at this to suggest that blackness in this context is very strongly associated with physical strength, military virtue, and skill, and so on. So blackness becomes associated with virtuous military skills. And in writing about this particular tournament, I was also looking at the construction of Highlanders as obviously as wild people. So this is a combination of blackness and wildness here. And I found this actually, this is a wonderful illustration. The Lord Lewis coat of arms, which I managed to get tracked down through the court of the Lord Lion. And on either side here, we can see wild Highlanders consumed in these kind of fiery flames. I think this is a direct link with this idea that Highlanders are not attached to material wealth, they're not attached to, say, buildings. They have this natural ownership of the landscape. And what we see in court festivals of this period, not only the tournament of the Wild Knight, but also in Mary Stuart's 1566 christening festival for James I VI at Stirling Castle, we have wild Highlanders burning a mock fort. Now, critics in the past have suggested this is a bit of theatrical display. It's the usual Renaissance. Others, wild Highlanders, going along with Moors and Turks and devils and things like that. But I'm suggesting here that this is actually part of an alternative construction of Highland identity, and that Mary, at this festival, where she has this set piece of theatre, if you like, military theatre, put on, is trying to display to an international audience of European ambassadors, Highland virtues of military strength, an inner nobility, inner riches, which are divorced from maybe corrupt urban values, and so on. This, if you like, Scottish co-opting of Highland identity is something that can be tracked through the 16th century, so that when the Highland ambassador visits the very young James V and is taken on a hunting trip in 1529, he explains, well, the papal ambassador, of course, is amazed at the temporary palace in the wild. This is what Sally Maxton calls it, actually, the temporary palace in the wild that's constructed for his hospitality. And then he watches it being burnt by these Highlanders. So he's amazed that this wonderful, rich, beautifully constructed hunting lodge is burnt to the ground. Particularly as he famously says, Scotland is but the heiress of the world, and he thinks this is amazing, this wonderful treasure has been burnt. But James V says it is the practice of our Highlanders, and I found that really interesting in the Pittscottian account. He says it's our Highlanders. So it seems to me here we have the beginnings, maybe, or we're certainly seeing the process of an appropriation of Highland culture as part of a much bigger pan-Scottish nationalism. And I think when Mary, then at her christening festival in 1566, has Highlanders, wild Highlanders, we know they're wild Highlanders, in the traditional accounts there's goat skins ordered for their costumes, when she has them firing a mock fort, I think it's part of this demonstration of military skill, military virtue, because they're good with pyrotechnics, but also this idea that they are hardy and untouched, if you like, by material greed. So, nevertheless, despite the rehabilitation, I think, of Highland culture in this way, it still remains a contested term, it still remains a contested concept. And as part, but before I get onto that, as part of the rehabilitation of Highland culture, what we get is, I think, a process where we get the appropriation, the co-opting, if you like, of the Highlander, and then the theatricalisation of the Highlander, certainly in court theatre, which happens quite early. And there's this lovely depiction of a wild Highlander from Lucas de Here's costume book. And he doesn't look very scary or intimidating at all. He looks quite dreamy and romantic, I would suggest. You can see that sort of the base of his tunic is approximating maybe a sort of pleated hilt, and he has a mantle. He looks quite different from some of the scary Irish characters in the same costume book. And I think there's a transition here where the wild Highlander becomes almost domesticated. It's our Highlander. The Highlander becomes theatricalised in this way. I've got another nice example to show this. This is from a later Mass in Stuttgart. And I don't know if you can just see, but sorry, I didn't want to do that. There we go. We've got a Highlander front here, anyway, I'm going to abandon that because I've clearly been very stupid with it. At the front here we have a Highlander. You can see that he's got some sort of plaid mantle on. However, he looks like quite a bourgeois Highlander. He's got some flat cap on, I suspect a blue cap. Behind him, in the slightly more wild costume, which has kind of foliage and things like that part of it, and a sort of ragged hat, is the Irishman. And to the left is the Englishman. It sounds like a very poor joke, actually, it's about to come up. To the left is the Englishman, who in the account of this mask, we're told is dressed very richly, but in an extremely old-fashioned manner. So I think he's a bit of a joke character as well. These heads as well, this is fantastic actually, these heads represent different points on the compass, different parts of the continent. There's a northern one, eastern one, southern one, and so on. And they all jogged around the hall, apparently. Then they came to a stop in front of the central stage, and then all these characters crawled out of the mouths of the heads and did a dance appropriate to their region. It may be that we have a Scot here because one of the guests of honour was Elizabeth of Bohemia, who was in the audience at the time. But I think it's quite interesting that here we have, the wild Scot, the terrifying barbarian, is part of a kind of theatrical display. And I think we're also seeing here part of a process whereby wildness and barbarity is being transposed onto the Irish. And there are obviously good reasons for this. We have a Scot on the English throne by 1603. And I think this is why Scots become theatricalised. Obviously, there's a lot of interest in Scotland at this time, but Scots become theatricalised and less demonised than they were before. And that demonisation then becomes intensified, I think, in an Irish context. Not only do we have an English king on the throne, we also have the policy of plantation in Ireland, which needs sort of ideological support, if you like. So in court culture this period, we see a lot of demonisation of the Irish. I'm also thinking of the Irish Mask at Court, 1616, Johnson's Irish Mask at Court. The Irish there aren't so much frightening as ridiculous. So there's a kind of a dual thing going on here, that they are ridiculed, but also demonised. In 1605, interestingly, the year of Johnson's first court masque, he also wrote a play called, or collaborated on a play, I should say, called Eastward Ho! And he got into huge trouble with that because it had anti-Scottish satire in it. Now, this is a kind of satire that probably had been fairly current at the time. Knowing Johnson, I'm sure he pushed it slightly too far, because that was very much his modus operandi. But he was in severe trouble. He was imprisoned. It was rumoured that he would have his ears and nose cut off in punishment for this Scottish satire, and he did actually write a lot of very sort of self-abasing letters to various important people asking for help. He got away with it, but it's interesting that satirising the Scots, whereas that had been something of a national sport in English drama up to this point, suddenly becomes something that you just can't do. So I think in 1605, at the beginning of the 17th century, I think we've got a sort of rhetorical nexus, if you like, of concepts relating to satire, praise, blackness, Scottishness, all swirling around in court culture as people are trying to sort of negotiate or deal with or process what does it mean to have a Scottish king on an English throne? What does that mean for an English people or a Scottish people? So there are instabilities relating to Scottish cultural identity that I believe get transmitted, as James really liked the sense of the English throne. I believe these instabilities also then travel with him. James is not happy at all with the way in which the Stuart crown has tried to appropriate Highland characteristics and turn them into part of this new Scottish nationhood, if you like. And in a lot of his writings, you can see that he's very, very bothered by it. Whereas Buchanan, obviously Mayer's student, seems to reject a lot of Mayer's ideas about civilization and about northernness and so on. James, I suppose, Buchanan's student, is maybe more rightly said to be Mayer's inheritor in terms of his views on geography and nationality. In James's well-known tract Demonology, his book on witchcraft that he was published in 1597, he has this exchange. It's a dialogue, this book, isn't it? As the more wise and experienced epistemon, who is obviously James, instructs Philomathus in all aspects of demonology, how to spot it, how to deal with it, and so on. So Philomathus says about possession by incubi and succubi, he says, is thought to be most common in such wild parts of the world as Lapland and Finland, or in our North Isles of Orkney and Shetland. And Epistemon replies, because where the devil finds greatest ignorance and barbarity, there assails he the grossliest, as I gave you the reason wherefore there was more witches of womankind nor men. So that's a double whammy for James, isn't it? Because he's having a pop at Highlanders and Islanders, but also those pesky women as well. So for James, northernness is not necessarily a seat, doesn't necessarily, if you like, give rise to sort of natural hardiness and virtue and all of these things that come from Livy, if you like, via Buchanan. Northernness is a place of evil and witchcraft. And it seems, and it's quite interesting, so he's picked up from there this clear division, if you like, between northernness, Highland culture and lowland culture, and he's given it a sort of a negative loading, if you like. We might say then the boundary is very clear. A few years later, though, he writes his counterblast to tobacco. And James, obviously, is well known as a great anti-smoker. He loathed smoking. And he sees tobacco as importing all sorts of dangerous wildness, barbarity and corruption with it. He sees, in the counterblast to tobacco, James picks up on this construction of civilization from Livy, and he compares original virtue with contemporary corruption, and suggests that this is a sort of historical process towards entropy, if you like, that is unavoidable, and that the taking of tobacco is a sign, is a florid sign of this corruption. And he explains it, this, if you like, this progress from original virtue and valour to urban sophisticated corruption in these terms. And he says, our fortunate and oft proved valour in wars abroad hath bred us a long and thrice happy peace, and peace and wealth hath brought forth general sluggishness. Okay, so we've got soft. This is the big problem here. And this softness has encouraged us to do things such as smoke, which is obviously very bad for us. And then a little bit further on in the counterblast, he says, what honour or policy can move us to imitate the barbarous and beastly manners of the wild, godless and slavish Indians? So this is interesting. James's diatribe against tobacco oscillates around tropes of contagion and infection. And he notes particularly that tobacco was used in the New World as a preventative for syphilis, as a cure for syphilis. However, tobacco on its own acts as a kind of further layer of infection. It doesn't deal with syphilis, it just offers an additional layer of infection. And he's very concerned that his English subjects, his new English subjects, are on this sort of historically determined path towards corruption, and now he must purge them and stop this happening. So there's a lot of discursive indeterminacy, I think, in the counterblast to tobacco. We're not sure, I'm not sure whose audience are. Are these the new English subjects? Are these the Scottish subjects? Are these maybe new British subjects he's talking to? And the other point about this, I think, is really interesting. That barrier, if you like, that ideological barrier between north and south, between the central civilization and then the far remote parts, that barrier has now been breached as Indian practices have been brought into the centre, as, if you like, Highland practices, Highland barbarity has also been brought into the centre. And James sees this as entailing imminent danger for the nation. It seems to me then that the formation of Great Britain at its very inception is marked by the same kind of rhetorical instabilities that we saw at work in Scottish folk culture from, say, 100 or 200 years prior to this point. And I have this notion that what I'm trying to track here is how constructions of Highland identity are co-opted into Scottish identity and how that then informs British identity. And we have this resistance, if you like, that marks that process throughout. So I want to go on now to just have to say a few words about Mask of Blackness. Just tell me if I'm going over time. Good, we're fine. About the Mask of Blackness, because this is Ben Jonson's first court masque for James's new court in Westminster, and it's attracted a lot of attention. So you can imagine it's been very fruitful for critics interested in gender and politics. I don't want to reject those kinds of analyses of this masque, but I'd quite like to add a further layer of resonance to those as well, to suggest that it's informed by a negotiation, a Scottish negotiation of political and regional identity. I think it's really important to remember it was Queen Anna who requested this masque of blackamoors. It wasn't something that Johnson came up with spontaneously. She specifically requested it. She had participated and watched these kinds of events with these kinds of characters, if you like, in them, not only in Scotland but also at home in Denmark as well. So the plot of the masque, very, very quickly, we have Niger appears, and he explains, accompanied by his 12 daughters, and he explains to the audience that they are distressed. The daughters of Niger are very distressed by their skin colour because they have been persuaded by a few brain-sick poets that blackness is not beautiful, to put it that way. Their father, Niger, tries to reassure them, but they don't listen to him. Niger says, that beauty is best, which not the colour, but the feature assures unto the creature. So these lines do have specific reference to Anne, specific relevance to Anne, because it refers to the fact that, yes, she and her ladies have black skin colour for the masque, but most obviously they have Western European features. They are black, but they're not black. Their blackness is very much skin deep. This was understood by observers of the masque. Dudley Carleton is often quoted by people writing on this masque because he was obviously horrified by it, the courtier Dudley Carleton. He wrote lots of letters describing the masque. He's particularly shocked that the Venetian ambassador should have kissed Queen Anna's hand, even though there was a danger it would have left a mark on his lips. So Carlton understands this is just paint, this is makeup, stage paint or something like that, but there is this sense that the Venetian ambassador could somehow be contaminated by this. In another letter to another correspondent, Carlton says, "You cannot imagine a more ugly sight than a troop of lean-cheeked Moors," which again I think is a really nice, it shows very nicely this mixing of skin colour and Western facial features, because they are lean-cheeked instead of maybe having the rounder cheeks that he might have imagined. And what upsets Carlton here is this mixing of racial characteristics. And he finishes off by saying, their costumes were rich, you can see the costumes were fabulous, but too light and courtesan-like as well. And as a wee side note as well, Queen Anna is 6 months pregnant when this masque takes place, so this is probably why they have these sort of unstructured, free-flowing costumes, whereas masque costumes of this period are usually highly structured, lots of kind of under armature and that kind of thing. So the racial indeterminacy in this masque that upset so many of the observers is actually justified by Johnson's sources, and Johnson goes to great pains in a presentation copy of this masque to include careful footnotes, so that if anybody's interested, they can look up where he gets his references from. And one of the references that he includes in the masque is to Pliny's Natural History. And I actually think, having read quite a lot of Johnson does this as a defence mechanism. He's defending himself against people like Carlton, who thinks this is just totally inappropriate and shocking and so on. So Johnson's saying, look, we've got classical precedent for this kind of thing. So if you follow up Johnson's reference, which I did, and you look at the natural history, you find that it's a section that describes the geography of North Africa. It describes the river Niger, very much in terms of, say, the River Nile, how it endows fertility to the landscape and so on. Then Pliny goes on to list the creatures that live in this landscape. They are mostly men monsters, half men, half beasts, kind of eye in the middle of the chest type thing. And then shortly after these men monsters, we get to the white Africans. And Pliny calls them, I can't even say this, Ethiopians, white Africans. And typologically, it seems quite interesting that they are very close to the men monsters. They're not the same as the men monsters, but they're literally the next breath away. So Johnson is showing us very clearly that there is classical justification for all this. And in order, I think, to placate any disturbance caused here, he very quickly builds into the plot of his masque a potential whitening for these daughters of Niger. And the daughters of Niger are told to bathe each month in the waters off Britain, and then they will somehow be miraculously whitened, and all will be well. Because obviously Britain is ruled by Sol, the Sun King, whose power is strong enough to blanch an Ethiop and revive a horse. Now, this doesn't happen. This is obviously Johnson setting himself up for next year's masque, but actually the King of Denmark comes and they all get drunk in 1606, and it's a very different type of masque based on material appetite. People fall downstairs and drop jelly, and it's all very fun. Doesn't work out how Johnson wanted it to. So I'd just like to conclude what might seem to be a kind of disparate collection of thoughts by suggesting that I'm really interested in how blackness and northernness and barbarity become aligned during this period. and how these kind of oscillating ideas offer resistance to each other, and then sometimes they coalesce and they come together and they overlap. But it seems to me it's something that continues into the formation of Great Britain. And it seems to me that somehow that imperial extension of national boundaries, whether it be to the north, encompassing Shetland and Orkney, or even to the south, as Mary Queen of Scots, as we know, has her eye on England, and beyond, actually it entails an internalisation of the barbarous, of the wild, which has its own horrors, if you like, its own benefits and its own horrors. And this horror, in terms of this imperial expansion and the internalisation of the wild, is something that the English also experienced as James comes to the throne. I'm sure, as most people here know, in the 1614 Parliament, John Hoskins, MP, predicted a genocidal massacre unless Scots were removed from positions of influence. And he advised James very strongly. He said, "Wise princes put away strangers." So it seems to me that Hoskins is actually predicting a kind of ethnic cleansing that Mayer, some hundreds of years earlier, tried to preempt with his kind of ideological boundary. By this time, that boundary has been breached, and the results seem pretty terrifying. And I've just put up this little doggerel rhyme that was circulating at the time, which is about Scots arriving, taking all the best jobs. Okay, thank you.